Okay, we are going to begin on time. We are educators. We love that. Welcome to Drawdown, Georgia's K-12 Climate Education webinar. We're so happy that you're all here. This is Climate Solutions That Go Beyond Carbon. It's part of a series of webinars that Drawdown Georgia is doing around the state and for the whole country. Next slide. I'm Jaimie Cloud, and I run the Cloud Institute for Sustainability Education. And I will introduce the rest of the panels as we go through the webinar. As I mentioned, this is part of a series that Drawdown Georgia is hosting. For today, our three big questions are: how can Georgia educators nurture and engage the next generation of climate leaders in our state? How are teachers employing hands-on learning experiences around climate with their students? And how do young leaders view their roles in the climate movement? So those are the three questions we're going to address today. Next, now you can go to the next sentence. The Drawdown Georgia is a statewide initiative focusing on advancing climate solutions in Georgia, but the rest of the country and the world are watching very carefully what Georgia is doing and very excited about that. Next. Drawdown Georgia takes inspiration from Project Drawdown, which is a leading resource for taking action on climate change. There is a website and a book and a new book called Regeneration by Paul Hawken, many resources. And we do have a slide at the end with lots and lots of great links to great resources available to everyone. Project Drawdown began with 200 mathematicians simply doing the math on what we need to do to reverse global warming in every kind of sector, farming, fisheries, forests, industry, very exciting. So if you're a math educator, this is your century. Next. There will be a Q&A section ongoing. There is a Q&A box actually on your screen. So if you have questions, clarifying questions on an ongoing basis, feel free to pop them in the chat there in the question box. And then we will also have a more formal and informal session at the end for Q&A. And I think we have one more housekeeping detail here. This session is being recorded, and so it'll be posted on the Drawdown Georgia website in the coming days, so you can always watch it and share it with your friends and family. Okay, next slide. I wanted to just introduce, I'm an educator for a sustainable future. So to me, it's all about what we need to know and what we need to be able to do to contribute to the future we want. So three things I chose that we need to know and be able to do in order to understand what's going on with climate change and global warming. We're going to talk a little bit about thinking about our thinking, the importance of distinguishing problems from symptoms, and the importance of thinking like a bathtub. So next slide, please. These are just little context setters for you. So Barry Richmond, who was a system dynamicist at MIT, used to always say all systems are perfectly designed to get the results they get. So it's no accident that we're in this situation at the moment. We built for it, we bought and sold for it, we educated for it unintentionally, but this is where we are, and we need to make a mid-course correction, as our beloved Ray Anderson would say. Next slide, please. And this is one of the ways of thinking that has gotten us into trouble. So I promised you we were going to think a little bit about our thinking. This is a little systems thinking joke that we have. Of course, if you cut that boat in half, you don't get two boats. It's one boat and we're all in it, and we're in various places in that boat. And so we need to work together to turn that ship around. Next. And Einstein said many wonderful things, but one of the things that we always quote him on is that the significant problems we face cannot be solved with the same thing we used to cause them in the first place. It does require a different way of thinking, and education for sustainability characterizes that different way of thinking that we need to do. Next slide, please. One of the ways of thinking is to distinguish problems from symptoms. And it's important to remember that climate change is a symptom of global warming, which is a symptom of emitting too many greenhouse gases faster than the Earth can absorb them, which is a symptom of bad design, which is a symptom of old and outdated thinking. And so it always comes back to education, not just because we're educators, but because it does. Next slide, please. And thinking like a bathtub is all about stocks and flows. So as in a bathtub situation, you have a faucet, that's the inflows, and the speed and volume of water coming into the bathtub is one variable we need to keep track of. And then the drain letting it out is another variable we need to keep track of. So if you go to the next slide, I'll explain what that means. So stocks are entities that can accumulate or can be depleted, such as water in a bathtub. And the flows make the stocks increase or decrease, as I mentioned, like the faucet and the drain. So if you have a faucet that's putting in too much water faster than the drain can take out, your bathtub is going to overflow. And that's the situation we're in when it comes to climate change and global warming. The reverse is also true. For example, in overfishing, if you take out more fish faster than the ocean can replenish them, you have the opposite problem. So in our case of global warming and climate change, we've been emitting too many greenhouse gases faster than the Earth can absorb. The Earth loves carbon to a certain extent, but everything in moderation. We've all learned that from our grandmothers. This would be a good time to put it into action. Okay, next slide. Those are the three things I think everybody needs to know and be able to do in order to understand what's going on with climate change and global warming. Think about our thinking, distinguish problems from symptoms, and think like a bathtub. All right, so I've set you up hopefully with a little context setter. At the Cloud Institute, we think of learners as the center of everything, and learners are our students, of course, but it's also the teachers, the parents, the administrators, everyone in our school communities. The learners are nested inside our classrooms with adults and young people learning together. Those classrooms are nested inside schools that learn, organizational policies and practices that make all of the first parts of the circle work. Those schools that learn are nested inside buildings with food and energy and transportation and materials and schoolyards. And all of that is nested inside our communities. So we believe that the unit of change, the most important unit of change, is schools and communities learning and working together for the future we want. We have all the children and young people legally required to be with us, and we can make great use of that time and that relationship. Next slide, please. And if you need any further information about Education for Sustainability, you can contact us here. And now I would like to introduce our panel. We have 4 wonderful speakers today, 4 stories that serve as exemplars of what's going on in the state of Georgia with respect to reversing global warming and educating about global warming and climate change. We have the science content specialist for Coweta County Schools. We have a teacher, a student, and a director of a community-based organization. So the first speaker that we're going to have is Dr. Donald White. He's the science content specialist at Coweta County School System. And he's going to say a few words about what's going on from his perspective, and we'll take it from there. Hi, Donald, welcome.
Hi, Jaimie, thank you very much. So everyone, I titled my presentation here, A New Approach to Environmental Education, Professional Learning. And I used air quotes, new, because nothing that I do is brand new. It's all modeled off of someone else's work. So I draw inspiration from all across the state of Georgia about approaches to professional education for teachers. And we chose teachers to focus on because we noticed that our teachers, who are all trained educators, don't always have a whole lot of professional experience outside of education. I know for me personally, this is my 25th year in education. My only other experience outside of education is work at Chick-fil-A. That I worked at Chick-fil-A in Fayetteville, Georgia from my senior year of high school through my senior year of college. That doesn't qualify as professional experience with the topics that we're talking about. So we really wanted to focus on teachers, because we know that when we impact teachers and we empower them, give them the tools that they need to take back to their students, then they impact those students for the rest of their career. So on this slide, you can see here the three partner organizations that I'm working with over these projects that I'm going to talk about. There's the Coweta County School System. Obviously, we supply the teachers. And then we have the Coweta County Water Education Team, or CWET as it's affectionately known. And it's a group of local government organizations, Coweta County government, Noonan city government, our local utilities, water utilities, Coweta Water, Noonan Utilities Water, and other various industry partners like Yamaha, who happens to be the largest water user in Coweta County. Also, we partnered this year with Coweta Fayette EMC. Actually, I'm sorry, this is 2022. We partnered in 2021 with Coweta Fayette EMC. And I'm going to share a little bit about the work that we've done with our teachers related to environmental education, specifically with the topics that we're talking about today with Drawdown, Georgia. So next slide, please. So here are my lovely band of teachers. We take this work very, very seriously. If you'll hit the button for me there, Blair, I think you'll notice somebody in the background. That is literally me falling off the back of this sign. So you caught me in action here, which is absolutely typical for me. But Blair, if you go to the next slide, you'll see a little bit about what we're trying to do. We started off focusing on making professional development an adventure. So Coweta Water Education Team set up summer educator adventures. So in 2017, we took a group of 25 teachers and followed the Chattahoochee through Georgia. So we started in Buford at the hatchery and looked at the water quality that was there. Then we moved to West Point Lake, which is just a little bit from us, and measured the water properties all along the way, which was fantastic. We said, well, this is great. The teachers loved it. Let's expand that a little bit. So then we wanted to see where the water ended up in Florida. So we followed it from Georgia to Florida. We went to Apalachicola. Then we decided we wanted to look at the Flint. So we followed the Flint from the airport over to Sapelo Island, looking at all along the way, looking at the water and the way that the water was changing, the way that the geography was changing. The whole point of this was giving the teachers the experience, the phenomenon, to be able to talk with their students about that they were witnessing in Georgia. Because we assume that teachers know about all the regions of Georgia, when in actuality, they may not. They may never have been to some of these regions, which is what we found out as we took these adventures. So we were immersing our educators in these phenomenon, and then we were giving them resources to take those phenomenon back to the classroom. So next slide, Blair. So in 2021, with our partnership with Coweta Fayette EMC, we started focusing on alternative energy. Coweta Fayette EMC has a large commitment to alternative energy production and use. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But the adventure, again, was focused on immersing the teachers in the experience. So we took 3 days. We spent day one at the Kendata building at Georgia Tech, which is an amazing sustainable building. It is like a test bed for all of the sustainable building techniques. It is a phenomenal building there. We stopped at Fourth Ward Park in the middle of Atlanta, which is a fantastic collaboration between NGO environmental groups and governmental groups. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we stopped at BMVW Motors in Union City, which is right up the road from Noonan, and not a place that many of my teachers will tell you that there's very innovative environmental related things going on. On day 2, we went to the Whiteside Solar Farm, which is Coweta Fayette EMC's solar plant, which their members can purchase electricity from directly. We stopped in the town of Trilith, which used to be Pinewood. You may know it as Pinewood Studios in Georgia. So if you've seen many of the Avenger films, those were filmed right in our back door, and we wanted our teachers to see the kind of things that were going on in that particular space related to environmental solutions. And then we went to this Camp Southern Ground, which you'll see in just a second, is the largest private solar installation in Georgia. Day 3 was Education Day. We spent the day at Coweta Fayette EMC headquarters. We met with power industry reps and talked about the goals of the power industry when it comes to sustainability and the environment. They got to drive electric vehicles, and we shared those curriculum resources that we wanted them to implement in the classroom. So next slide, please, Blair. So some impacts and deliverables from these events. There was a classroom weather station project. One of our 6th grade teachers wanted to install a weather station and have her students do a study for their school about the feasibility of an alternative energy source for powering the school. So she was having her students look at wind power, geothermal, and solar. Coweta Fayette EMC representatives who were on the trip with us heard the teacher talking about this, and they were like, well, in order to figure out if it's viable, you need to collect some data. So let's buy you a weather station so that you can start collecting that data and give that to your students. So that's what happened. And so that project then led to us presenting that project on the GPB Classroom Conversation podcast. That's a partnership between Georgia Public Broadcasting and the Georgia DOE. So if you want to hear more about that, you can check out that podcast. There's other great classroom conversations there as well. We gave the teachers who attended this, you can see the materials there that they got to see and take back to their classrooms. They got to meet EMC professionals. We had 32 teachers who participated, 7 administrators and industry partners. We had, from those 32 teachers, there were almost 4,000 students who were directly impacted. Of those 4,000 students, there were 11,000 parents who were connected to those students who were impacted. As a result of the media campaign related to this particular project, 80,000 members of the Coweta Fayette EMC got to learn a little bit about what we were all doing together related to this whole project. So that was a huge win for Coweta Fayette EMC. It was a huge win for us because we got so much experience for our teachers. I want to talk a little bit more about the experience there. So next slide, Blair. For Coweta Fayette EMC, Coweta Fayette EMC surveys their membership every year to track the interest in green technology. And you can see here some of their data, where 79% of their members support renewable energy. But what shows the most impact for them is that Coweta Fayette EMC is committed to local communities, which they demonstrated by engaging our teachers in order to take them on this particular project. Next slide. The target was all the targets that you would typically have for an educational experience like this. There's a lot of words on here, but you get the idea. It was teachers, students, parents, the members of the Coweta Fayette EMC organization, industry reps. We did talk with other folks who are outside of Coweta Fayette EMC who were looking at this as a model to replicate and take back. Obviously media, and then government officials. There's new legislation related to renewable energy and those kind of things coming up. And they wanted to make sure that those government officials saw how they were approaching it. Next slide. So here we are, day 1 at Georgia Tech. We're talking about carbon footprint and the building techniques that are involved in that. And all of this was modeled for them at the Kendata building. This is a fantastic building. If you ever get a chance to go, you should really should check it out. Next slide. When we do these educator adventures, one of the things we focus on is food, because we've noticed that when you feed the teachers very well, they tend to have a much better attitude. So, we had to stop at the varsity. After lunch, we stopped at the Fourth Ward Park. The Fourth Ward Park is a retention pond. You guys have retention ponds and buildings near you. They're probably ugly, surrounded by a chain link fence, and they're just gross, maybe have frogs in them, who knows. But this Fourth Ward Park is a beautiful, beautiful facility that resulted in $1 billion worth of development that sprung up around what is a glorified retention pond. And this, we're showing the teachers the connection between being creative problem solvers and industry and government. Next slide. Obviously had plenty of swag for them, which always, the teachers are going to take it from you if it's not nailed down anyway, so you might as well give it to them. Next slide. And then our last stop was BMW Auto in Union City. And their business model is focusing on electric vehicle resales. But as a side project, they're also repurposing old car batteries, the hybrid car batteries like the Prius. Those batteries, they're taking those batteries and repurposing them for battery storage towers for home use. So, a lot of the questions that we get from folks about this kind of stuff is, how are we going to reuse, what are we going to do with all these batteries once, everybody goes to electric vehicles? Well, these guys are showing exactly how to do it, and our teachers are able to see that. Next slide. Day 2, we spent the day at Whiteside Solar Farm and got to hear from this guy right here in the suspenders as a sales rep. He was amazing, engaging. Our teachers loved him. And we had a great time seeing the solar farm and talking about all of the options for EMC members to be able to purchase this power. Next slide. We stopped for lunch in the town of Trilith. They got to see presentations from local developers who are trying to make Trilith the most energy efficient, sustainable community in the country. And it is a fantastic experience for them. They got to hear the realities of solar power in a residential setting. They got to hear about the realities of geothermal power in the residential setting. So it was fascinating to have those conversations. And these were honest conversations. They weren't marketing conversations. These were, what are the realities of this? Well, yeah, geothermal in Georgia is expensive, and the return on investment is it's a long period of time. So that was something important for our teachers to hear. Next slide. And then we got to go to Camp Southern Ground. And again, we were trying to draw this back to how this impacts students, because we have lots of students in Coweta County who participate in Camp Southern Ground, and that their whole experience was being powered by renewable energy in the form of solar power, the largest private installation. Zach Brown, the country reformer, he put this in place for his camp to be able to run off of. So it was great to make the connection between the alternative energy and our students. Next slide. Day 3 was curriculum day, and we got to hear from industry reps. We got to hear from Coweta Fayette EMC talking about the direction of energy production industry and the changes that are coming. Next slide. They got to hear from local industry reps. Our friends at Yamaha, again, we're back there. We got to hear from them about their sustainability practices. And the whole idea with this was that this is not something that the hippie tree huggers are just trying to sell you. This is something that industry is actually putting in place because it's marketable. It can produce profits. Next slide. This is our favorite part of the day, I think. We got to drive the electric vehicles. Unfortunately, we did have the Coweta Fayette EMC safety guy come out and tell us to keep the Teslas under 10 miles an hour, which was difficult, but there's so much fun to drive. Next slide. And then we also partnered with Green Power EMC, and they gave us the curriculum that we're working on. So next slide. And here we showed them how to implement it in the classroom. So they got to put their hands on it. Next slide. So our takeaways. The number one thing is make it phenomenal, make it memorable, make it something that the teachers are going to go back and talk about. And remember that your teachers, that you're working with them, they're going to be your force multipliers. So they're going to be the ones who are going to take it back and share it with students. And the more teachers you reach, the more students you reach. But those teachers may not have any experience or knowledge about things that are going on outside the classroom. So you need to show that to them. You need to make sure that you're making whatever you're offering them a strategy, not an opportunity. Teachers have way too many opportunities, which take up their time. A lot of that is personal, those kind of things. We want to make it a strategy, something that they can employ right away. If you feed them, they'll come. Make sure that you feed them well, and you'll get a whole lot of engagement for them. And then it's not just enough to get them to come out to these events. You have to get them to implement it in the classroom. And the only way that they'll do that is if you walk into the classroom with them, roll up your sleeves. If you take industry representatives who will come in and help them implement the things that you're talking about, you'll get so much more buy-in from the teachers. The teachers will share that enthusiasm with their students. And then, we just develop a whole new group of problem solvers who can help us with all of this. So that's a little bit about what we did. It's not new. We've had teachers in the field for forever, but our approach to this was very intentional to make it very engaging, very memorable, and something that they would be willing to take back to the classroom and implement. So
it's thrilling. Thank you so much. You have about 30 seconds to share one story of some student work that you found exemplary.
Well, if I only have 30 seconds, I got to talk about my daughter. My daughter has been to the International Science Fair twice over the past couple of years. She does oyster research. She's been working in Apalachicola with researchers down there, trying to improve water quality through oysters and getting the oysters to grow back. She participated in the Stockholm Junior Water Prize, which is an international water competition. And she won an award there. So all of that has been influenced by the fact that I drag her on these events with me. So that's, a personal connection, but that's also an example of student connection. And there are other stories just like hers, but she's my favorite. So
excellent. Thank you so much, Donald. Now I'm going to introduce Katie Holliday. She's a middle grade science educator at Tybee Island Maritime Academy. And so hit it, Katie.
All right, thank you. Blair, you can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So this is a picture that just kind of represents our school, Tybee Island Maritime Academy. The students actually helped me choose the photo to go on this presentation. We are a K-8 public charter school that's located on Tybee Island, obviously, and we work really hard. We do project-based learning. We are a STEAM certified school, and we also play hard, as you can see from the photo too. We like to have fun while we learn as well. So that's just a little bit about us. I currently teach middle grade science. I teach 6th grade earth science. We offer high school environmental science to our 7th graders. And this year I am working with some wonderful 8th graders in an ecological research class where we are focused on science fair. And I actually just made kind of a crazy connection while Donald was talking that his daughter with her oyster research project actually Zoomed with my students and inspired a lot of these 8th graders here at Tybee Island Maritime Academy to participate in science fair this year. And Etta, who is one of my awesome students who's with me, is going to be speaking to you all about that as well. So very cool connection. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide there. So just a little bit about a couple of years ago, I was teaching 6th grade earth science, and on Tybee Island, we're directly impacted by climate change today. We have king tides that happen that can close the roads to the school. And that's happened to us a few times recently. We've started school late because the tides are just getting higher and higher. And so we were doing a case study project on sea level rise. And when you look at the image here, you can see the prediction for Tybee Island if we had 3 feet of sea level rise. And it's kind of, a depressing graphic, if you will. So I realized that in doing this climate change education with students, you really have to focus on the solutions. And you can go to the next slide, Blair. I had this big change of thinking when I was able to attend a fabulous teacher workshop called Teachers on the Estuary, which is hosted by, this one was hosted by the Wells National Estuarine Research Reserve. And there was a panel discussion for educators on climate change. And I was introduced to Project Drawdown. And I'll never forget, one of the panelists told me about how his own child could kind of get a bit depressed about climate change. And he would say, just go to the Drawdown website and pick one solution and think of what you can do. And that was just so meaningful for me that I kind of started doing my own research into Project Drawdown and started thinking about ways that I could bring this into the curriculum at our school. So you can go to the next slide. At our school, at TEMA, we refer to our school as TEMA. We are project-based learning, and we use the design process in all that we do. So when thinking about climate change this next time with the next project, I started thinking about, well, first, this is an environmental science class. Students need to understand how carbon cycles through the environment, but we wanted to keep it local. So we asked the students, and you can go on to the next slide, to create these graphic representations of the carbon cycle on Tybee Island, so that they could get an idea of how carbon is moving around on our island, and hopefully that the graphics would then help them think about some potential solutions to the problem. So that turned out to be a really cool project where we were able to have a guest artist. Her name's Inky Brittany, who's a graphic recorder, who helped the students with this. And it was we were able to keep these displayed and refer back to them as we worked on our project. So
to be able to use some of that student work as exemplars of data visualization. That's excellent.
Oh, great. Thanks. We also invited John Lanier, who is with Project Drawdown. I just reached out to him on email, and I invited him to speak to the students as well, and he agreed. And so we had a Zoom with him. And you can go to the next slide, Blair. This was really impactful for the students to have him speak to us. And he actually shared this graphic with us, and he explained the bathtub analogy that Jaimie discussed at the beginning of this webinar. And that explaining that to the students was great. That was something that we referred back to time and time again throughout the unit to help them throughout the whole project, to try and help them understand the difference between, the carbon sources and carbon sinks, and how, we don't want the bathtub to overflow. So I'm glad you brought that up at the beginning, because that was something that really helped us out a lot. And so I wanted to share that with everybody today. And you can go to the next slide. And the other thing that he shared with us, and he talked a lot about, were the 20 Drawdown Georgia solutions. And so he shared with us the 5 different categories, and he talked about them with us. And then the students were able to begin imagining solutions, thinking about our school and our island. What are some things that we think we can do? And so based on this, we picked 2 out of the 20 that we wanted to focus on. Well, we wanted to focus on reducing food waste. Food and agriculture was a big one, because we noticed that the lunch program at our school, we were having a lot of, we were doing bag lunches because of COVID, and we were having a lot of food waste happening every day. So we decided that was something we wanted to tackle. And we also wanted to focus on coastal wetlands, because that's something that's right there on Tybee that the students were already really passionate about, was preserving coastal wetlands. So you can go to the next slide. So our first goal was trying to end food waste at TEMA and beyond. We started out with middle grades, and then we wanted to try and scale up. And with this project, we found the EPA's food recovery hierarchy pyramid, and the students actually kind of broke up into groups based on the topic that they were interested in. We had some students that were trying to focus on source reduction, reducing any extra lunches ordered. And we had some students that were really focused on kind of marketing. They were our marketing and PR campaign that tried to get the word out to the other students in the school about what we were doing. And we had our data team that was recording data every day on all of the food that was being wasted to try and, get some numbers to see how much we were wasting and to try and figure out how much we could actually save. And then we had a composting team. And so all the students had their groups, and we were all working on this at the same time to try and reduce our food waste. And if you go to the next slide there, we did start, here's a couple pictures of some things that we had going on. We had the students started this campaign to make our lunch ordering system more effective so that we wouldn't have any excess lunch orders. We also started a box where people could, any of the food that like bags of carrots or apples, people could take with them to try and feed hungry people. We had kids that would take leftovers to their chickens. And then finally, we started composting. And this was really fun. The students got really into this, that we had the engineering design team that they were designing different types of compost bins. And we decided on worm composting, and they were able to actually write a grant that they got from Chipotle to get some money, about $1,000, to order the supplies and the worms and everything so that we could start composting food here at our school. So that was a successful product. Etta was on the marketing team, right? And she helped create a lot of graphics for us to share.
My team won the grant.
Yeah, her team actually won
Say
the
it again,
grant.
Etta. My team in ELA won the grant.
Woohoo!
So they had to write, it was a writing challenge, and they were actually awarded this grant to help us get the worms, which are more expensive than you think, but they multiply, so that's good. So, all right, you can go to the next slide. And the second solution that we want to focus on, something very near and dear to our hearts at TEMA, which is preserving our salt marsh wetlands, our salt marsh ecosystem. And this is something that the students worked on throughout the year. They participated in citizen science through Adopt a Wetland to monitor the health of the ecosystem, share our data with scientists, which we actually had a presentation with a local marine biologist at the end of the year where they reported our data from the year to him and got his feedback on whether he thought that the wetland was healthy, which he did. So that was good news. And they also created some videos. They created how-to videos to show other people how to monitor wetland health and participate in Adopt a Stream. And they also created some nature documentaries to show to people in our community to let them know how important the salt marsh ecosystem is and why it's something that we need to preserve. So those were some projects that we did related to what came out of our Drawdown Georgia Zoom that I think were really successful. So if you focus on the solutions and you give the students those choices and think about things that are important and meaningful to them, then they'll really get into it. I'd say there's a lot of student engagement in both of those projects. So if you go to the next slide. And there was one other thing I wanted to highlight that we did that was really really cool project. And Etta's going to talk more about this as well. It's a Future Cities competition. This is an international project that's open to any middle schoolers anywhere. And last year, the theme for this project was to design a city of the future that's based on the principles of circular economy. And so through this project, the students had to think a lot about how to repurpose materials, to design things more efficiently. And it was just a really great experience. And you can see some of the teams here. We've got one team that won a prize for best futuristic design, and they had a lot of fun doing it. You can go to the next slide, Blair. And it was also a great way to engage community partners in our area. We had his name is Captain Charlie Phillips from Sapelo Sea Farms. talked to our students about shellfish aquaculture and how shellfish aquaculture is one way to grow food that actually helps the environment because the shellfish help clean the water. And then he gave us a bunch of his clams, took me out on his airboat and gave us about 300 clams so we could have clam chowder while they were working on their projects. You can kind of see the stuff in the background, which was really fun. And we also had a local company called Core Compost Code of Return came to speak to the students about their passion for circular economy and everything they're doing in our community, as well as a company called Repurpose Savannah that's focused on repurposing building materials. And they actually donated some repurposed building materials for the students to design their scaled models for the Future Cities project. So it's a great project to bring in local businesses, people in your community who are already like doing these solutions, these things that are so amazing, and get the kids to talk to them. So that was great. And then next slide. And then I just wanted to highlight that this year's Future City Challenge is actually focused on climate change. The goal is to choose a climate change impact and design an innovative climate change adaptation and one mitigation strategy. So we're going to be doing that this year. We're going to participate in the competition. And if any middle school teachers are out there, I would encourage you to do the same. It's a very worthwhile experience. And with that, I'm going to let Etta tell you about her experience with this project.
Before you do that, Etta, give me 1 second. I just want to hear from you one thing that comes to mind when you think about the difference in your students' motivation, their thinking, their creativity when you shifted from game over to game on.
Well, the one word that just immediately comes to mind is just engagement. Yeah. Student engagement, just having a sense of feeling that they are, that we can do something is very powerful. And they did a lot, and they're still doing it, as you'll hear from Etta. So it's been huge. It's been a game changer for me as a teacher to have that shift in thinking, and definitely for my students as well.
Nice. One of the principles of education for sustainability is that we're all responsible because everything we do and don't do makes a difference. So it's not only that we can make a difference, we already do. So be intentional about the difference you want to make and then make it. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Excellent point.
Etta. So this is Etta Wade. Etta is an 8th grade student at Tybee Island Maritime Academy. And here you go, Etta.
Okay. I'm Etta. I was in 3rd grade last year. But last year we did the Future Cities competition, and this is just a couple pictures of my city. One of the requirements was to include a moving part that followed the elements of a circular economy. So we created a little tidal energy thing, because the tides out on Tybee are a lot higher than other places. And there was a bunch of copper wire and inside a magnet. So when the waves moved up and down, the magnet would move and create energy. This project overall was really helpful in all of our classes because it sort of worked with everything, because you also have to write an essay, and then you have to scale down your whole city and research all of the things. So it's really good for like an all-around project where you can work on it in every class. And it also gave us a lot of freedom with what we wanted to do. They were like requirements, but we could have what buildings we wanted, and it was very student idea centered, which I think is good because it helps us feel like we have our own freedom, and it's not like write this, do this and stuff. You can go to the next slide. And then we've also gone out on a couple trips last year. Last year, me and 13 other students went out to Helen, Georgia for the Adopt a Stream conference. We were out there for 3 days, I think, yeah. Mm-hmm. And it was a really good experience to sort of learn firsthand what other people are doing with this project, not just out on Tybee, but people who are working with freshwater streams and doing other research projects based around water. We also went to the International Science Fair Outreach Day, which was really fun because we got to inspect a bunch of other people's work to sort of think about what we wanted to do this year, since we're competing this year. We also got to look at a bunch of really cool equipment. That's what that picture is. That's when we were looking at equipment for testing a bunch of parameters with water and things like that. You can go to the next slide. And this year, I'm working with biomimicry for my science fair project. I want to design a flood shelter by biomimicking crab burrows, so it's more affordable and effective. And that sort of really plays into climate change with the fact that we're out on an island and hurricanes cause like a lot of flooding, and with sea level rise, it's good to have more affordable and effective flood shelters. You can go to the next one. And then a bunch of my friends are doing things also based around climate change solutions. And we pick these all like by ourselves without outside influence. A bunch of people are doing aquaponics, which is really cool because we sort of have people working with a bunch of different variables with energy, like different light sources, and someone I think is doing something with saltwater and freshwater and seeing if the plants can still grow like that, to find solutions for in the future when saltwater becomes more of a source. Yeah.
All right. One question I have for you, which may be useful for the audience, is help us make the connection and connect the dots between, for example, stormwater runoff solutions, or pick any of these projects that you've listed here. What's the connection between that and reversing global warming? Pick any project.
I'll go with stormwater runoff. So all of that water that's running off into streams and the ocean and things like that is putting in a bunch of extra nutrients and chemicals that, like fertilizers, if there's too much phosphorus or nitrates in the water, a bunch of algae will bloom and create dead areas, I think is what that's called. Mm-hmm. So sort of working to create permeable surfaces, which are like surfaces where the water can go through the earth and filter out those chemicals, really helps to reduce water becoming not safe to drink or not allowing any fish or marine life to live in the water.
And does it also help the ocean absorb the carbon that it needs to absorb? Because if it's dead, it can't do anything, correct?
That's pretty true, correct.
Yeah. Interesting, fascinating. And I'm so excited that you're doing biomimicry. That's one of my all-time favorite design challenges. I hope you'll compete again. They have a biomimicry design challenge for students, and the middle school students actually won over some college students last year. So just saying. Thank you so much, Etta. Okay, so are you anything else you want to add before we switch over to Ramya?
No.
Okay, great. So now I would like to introduce Ramya Shivkumar. She is the Director and Youth Program Manager at Green Cell, and she represents a community-based organization also contributing to reversing global warming. Hit it, Ramya.
Thank you for that introduction, Jaimie. Green Cell is a nonprofit organization. We are passionate about raising awareness about environmental solutions and promoting sustainable solutions. We are a group of 50 plus adult and about 40 youth volunteers Our mission is to help everyone go green. We want to help everyone transition from a wasteful lifestyle to one that is more resourceful. We believe in individual and collective action. We want to focus on the I first and then us. So we aim to, this is something that we just came up with. We aim to not swim against the tide. We aim to change the direction of the tide. Next slide, please. I want to take this opportunity to acknowledge the engineering firm that I work for, Windward Engineers and Consultants, for supporting me with my work with the nonprofit. They are the first minority-owned American firm to sign the MEP 2040 pledge, which is to reduce operational carbon to zero by 2030, and for all our engineering projects targeting net zero by 2040. So just a shout out to the firm that I work for. Thanks to them, I'm able to be here on their time, supporting Green Cell and Drawdown, Georgia. Next slide, please. So why did we start this youth program? As observed by this NPR study in 2021, 2022, it is clear that climate change has become a politically charged issue, and overall only 66% of the people think that it should be taught in schools, and that's where we came in. Next slide. Yeah. So if you can see the image to the left, even if science concepts related to climate change are taught, among the 505 teachers interviewed, 65% did not think it's related to the subject they teach. And why is that? That's because climate change not just impacts the environment, but it also impacts our economy and society. It can be hard to capture the complete scope of this topic by one particular teacher in one particular subject, unless you have educators like Katie. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go into these definitions because we all know it. What I'm trying to point out here, though, is that these definitions taught in our classrooms do not capture what we will see in the next slide. Next slide, please. Those definitions don't capture the human and the complex socioeconomic impact of climate change. The kids at TIMA are so lucky to have educators like Katie. It would be great if more schools adopted these models of learning. Next slide. So we enjoyed talking about this movie in one of our youth weekly meetings. This movie was about a comet hurtling towards Earth as a metaphor for climate change. Our program facilitates, those tough conversations. We help kids verbalize climate change anxiety. Next slide. Working at the grassroots means that we feel the need to understand why there is a disconnect. Why does our brain stop us from taking climate change seriously? There is even a term for this. It's called cognitive dissonance. It is a mental discomfort created by holding more than one conflicting belief at once. This plays a part in our dismissal of climate change. For example, you want to be healthy, but you don't exercise regularly or eat a nutritious diet. So no one wants to believe that their daily activities, from switching on a light to leaving the screen monitors on at night to using disposable plastic cutlery, is responsible for global disaster that's already turned millions of people into climate change refugees and killed scores of other people. Next slide, please. So what Green Cell is trying to do with our youth program is helping kids draw that connection between climate science and climate action. We are reminding people about that connection. And more importantly, we are reminding them that they can do something about it. So if we titled the movie, we would call it Don't Just Look Up, Do Something About It. Next slide, please. So we identified that while most kids are willing to help solve climate change, they are worried about it. There are gaps in their understanding when it comes to application of these science concepts in their everyday life. A transformation is required in their own lives in order to demand change for the community around them. Our programs seek to answer a simple question: what can I do? I'm just a kid. Next slide, please. So the greatest threat to this planet is the belief that, someone else is going to come and save us. Whether it's Elon Musk or somebody else, somebody else will just come and, do something and we'll all be saved. So the youth program is dedicated to leading this change in our communities because we believe that adolescence and early adulthood are ideal times to foster such civic engagement. Imparting awareness and inculcating environmental stewardship during these developmental periods, we believe will sort of lead the culture of sustainability. Next slide, please. So there is no shortage of resources about climate change on the internet. A quick search can give you literally hundreds of wonderful resources that other people have created. What we found lacking was the translation. We aim to make climate education accessible to kids and adults. We also want to make it actionable. So our Greener Sunshine week-long camp has been structured to talk about one topic each day, followed by an eco-activity. Our mantra is to make it fun, and we get immediate feedback. How? Because it's a free camp. And if the kids don't find it entertaining, don't think they're learning anything that is of use to them, they don't return the next day. Simple. So over the last 3 years, we've reached about 300 plus kids. Next slide, please. So the kids in the program initiate and work internally in groups on many projects. We want them to solve real world problems which are complex. We want to help them turn failures into experiences. So we support intrapreneurship, meaning 2 kids within the youth program launched Mission Zelina, which is an initiative to hand out green missions to elementary school kids. Another group created an eco club curriculum because we found that many eco clubs lack mentorship and guidance. While there are many eco club curriculums out there, it was hard for kids to translate that into tasks for each meeting. So I recently shared the curriculum we developed with my daughter's teacher who wants to start a recycling club in the school. And she said it helped her cut down so much prep work. So being a small nonprofit, we felt the need to connect our projects to also, UN sustainable design goals and to Drawdown Georgia solutions to understand the impact we're making. So what we've done here is we've listed these projects into awareness, action, and advocacy. And then we are trying to map each of our projects or each of our tasks into the kind of impact it makes as it relates to these goals and solutions. Next slide, please. So about a third of methane emissions is from landfills. So according to Drawdown Georgia, we can reduce 1 metric ton of CO2 in Georgia by diverting 2 million tons of organic food waste to composting from landfills. We can also reduce 1 metric ton of CO2 in Georgia by recycling at least 20% of currently disposed paper waste annually. So here we wanted to showcase the power of crowd solving. While a top-down approach to climate change is faster, we believe it's equally important to encourage a grassroots level change that is very long-lasting. So as you can see in these images, you have volunteers collecting glass, you have 70 green cell families, composting, and you look at the collective impact of those actions. Next slide, please. So there are different aspects to the youth program. So green cell education is one of them. And so where we take these kids and we take them on site visits to, say, the Autry Mill Nature Preserve, which is a local nature preserve, to the Gwinnett Environmental Center or to the wastewater treatment plant to help them understand what is going on in the community, what are the different exciting things that are being done in the space, and how it relates to climate action. Next slide, please. So Green Cell Kids have initiated several projects. This year, we hosted our first international summer camp and learned so much about environmental justice and how our content needs to be modified to factor that. Our We Care team curated an orientation course for new kids joining Green Cell so they understand fundamental climate change concepts. This course included amazing resources, including, Drawdown Learn, available to us, and the team curated the content and also helped with, the new member onboarding process. So we also encourage kids that want to work on their own eco-service projects. For example, the right bottom corner, you have Pradyun, who's helped recycle more than 3,000 pounds of glass from his subdivision alone for the last 2 years. Next slide, please. So we also want to encourage collaborations and participations with many amazing organizations because we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So we participated with Trees Atlanta to plant more trees. We participated with MedShare to rescue and donate medical supplies to third world countries, saving a large amount of lives. So we hope that through these efforts, the kids learn that the sphere of influence is limitless. So whether you're interested in art, whether you're interested in science, whether you're interested in medicine, engineering, the opportunities are limitless to engage with the community. Next slide, please. And then we also have Green Cell campaign. So what we want the kids to do is to spread the message and then make it actionable. So we collect metrics on how much water was saved, how many plastic bags were refused. We recently launched the Solarize Foresight Ambassador program that encourages youth to participate and spread awareness about the county-wide Solarize initiative. So we want to try and I wouldn't say everything, but we want to attack it so that many kids feel like, hey, this is something I'm interested in. I want to participate. It's not just some kid that's interested in environmental science. So that's sort of our goal. Next slide, please. We encourage the kids to participate in advocacy efforts. Our youth advocated for ocean climate action during the National Ocean Climate Action Lobby Day, which was in April of last year. They were the only youth-led contingent from Georgia. They called themselves Youth for OC Action. They hope to raise awareness among Georgia leaders and kids about climate change impacts, how it impacts vulnerable communities, coastal communities, and their change.org petition, which they shared with many of their school kids, asking them if they knew about what ocean climate action was. That got 2,500 signatures. And they also won a spot to showcase their efforts at the Georgia Tech's Global Climate Symposium. Next slide, please. So we love Brenna Quinlan, and we love this quote from Brenna Quinlan because she has the ability to translate complex concepts into simple visuals that are so easy to understand. So this is my personal favorite. The world is shaped by the stories we choose to hero. So, I want to thank all the Green Cell volunteers, the kids and their parents for putting in the work weekday nights and weekends to make a difference. The generosity of so many people with their time and money that has helped us move forward. We also want to thank Drawdown Georgia for choosing to showcase such wonderful initiatives by everybody on this panel. And I am so humbled and honored to be here presenting this information and learning from all the other folks on the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ramya. One question for you. What is one thing that you've learned from this most recent work that maybe was a little bit surprising? You didn't expect to learn that. Is there anything like that or any powerful learning that you can speak to?
I think the one most powerful learning for me has been we had set up these summer camps the last 2 years, and they were really great. The kind of people who were signing up for those camps were belonging to the same socio-economic strata probably. And so when we were talking about what can you do as a kid, we talked about switching off the light, turning down the air conditioning, setting the temperature to 78, 68, carpooling and things like that, no idling, so many of those solutions, right? When we launched our international summer camp and we had 100 kids coming from who participated, more than 100 kids participated from India, we had to rework everything, including the emails that we sent out to them where we encouraged them to log in using a laptop. We had to think about that because those kids may not have a laptop. They may just have a small cell phone. They may not have cars at all. They may not even have a bike. They may, they don't understand the concept of air conditioning because they don't have air conditioning. So many of that content had to be modified to cater to those children. And then we understood that, the same solutions, or the way we approach those solutions may not apply to everyone, which is sort of how Katie, I saw how she showed that, carbon cycle and how that relates to Tybee Island. That is really important. That translation is very important, because otherwise we will lose so many opportunities. And that's one of the wonderful things about Drawdown Georgia, because it is catered for Georgia. It is not something, anyway. So that's one thing. And the other one that I want to really stress about is this fear of failure that's there among all the kids today. We need to create a platform where there is no fear of failure, where they are allowed to explore and fail gloriously, fail fast. So that way they learn from that experience and they continue to pivot until they find that optimum solution, because there's no perfect solution. You have a solution that works right now for everyone, or for most people.
Nice. Thank you. Glad I asked. So now we can transition into the Q&A and information sharing section of our program. So a couple of things that people have been sending me little notes throughout the whole program. If the speakers could please put your names and contact information in the chat, that would be really useful for people. That was a request by a few people. I think that they also exist on the slides, but I think if you could put them in the chat, that would be awesome, because a lot of people want to know how they can get a hold of all of you. So that's the first thing. I'm also thinking of, I'm going to read, there's a couple of things here. We've already got a few questions that I'm going to start us off with, but I'm also inviting all of you listeners to ask some questions. Pop them in the chat, in the Q&A box there, because we are ready to have a conversation. And the first one is, let's see here. Okay. We have, Jay Bassett, who is in Georgia and has been an advocate of sustainability and environmental education for many years, most recently through the US EPA. He's offering a resource on food waste, the WWF Food Warriors Program. It's a USDA EPA audit guide. So he's popped that in the chat box. So I'm calling everybody's attention to that. And of course, the production of food, as he's sharing, is the #1 most impactful activity we do on the planet. I always say to people, when they talk about, needs and wants, and that we should really just focus on what we need, not what we want. Well, food is one of those things we need. It doesn't, just because we need it doesn't make it sustainable, and just because we want it doesn't make it unsustainable. So obviously, shifting towards a sustainable and even regenerative food system, leaving the place better than we found it, is the only direction that makes any sense. So one thing, another question that people have asked. Let's see. Oh, just one more thing from Jay. What's the role of schools as a community and formal education asset as part of the broader set of efforts and coalitions in supporting equitable and sustainable community development? To me, and he added community development being an essential component in meeting Drawdown goals. To me, the involvement of schools means the involvement of children and young people and their teachers. And whenever I go and speak to municipal leaders, corporate leaders, I'm always surprised that they have not reached out to their school systems. They want to move toward a sustainable future, but where are they going without all the children, young people, and their teachers? So to me, schools are the secret sauce, and the children and young people are what will make successful. We need the adults too. We're not just handing over the problems that we've got, but we need to work together. So to me, schools play a vital role, and we want to make sure that we know what our unique contribution is as educators and students, so that they can understand it. So we're all playing our role. So one question that's come up and here we've got some more coming in the chat, are what have been some of the challenges that you faced, and maybe one really good one that you faced and that you were able to overcome. So any of you, one or two examples of some roadblock or obstacle that got in your way, and then some, and how you actually overcame it. Anybody got a good story for us on that?
I mean, I guess I could just say that with teaching, anytime you're teaching, like, especially if you're trying something new, you always have to, you have to constantly change what you're doing. You know, you have to constantly rework how a project's going, or thinking about, you know, different ways to organize things, different ways to think. So I think it's just, that's a part of that design process. You know, you're trying something, you have to go back, you have to revise. It's constant.
Yep, it's an iterative process.
Yes.
Yep, we like to say, read the feedback and self-correct.
Yeah. Yes.
Yep. Any other challenges that that you want to share? I've got some more notes here and questions and things people want to talk about.
I think I can say that there is, you know, the sense of urgency is lost on a lot of people. And so that's been working at a grassroots level. I think there's that challenge that we have to always encounter. And how do we, it's not that we've found a perfect solution for it. We're still trying. And I think more and more people come to know about this and come to know about different community partners, and we can work together. You know, I think those challenges will sort of go away. At least I hope so.
Yeah. And that reminds me, you know, one of the things we've learned from the brain scientists is that it's very difficult for humans with our reptilian brains to see the results of our actions that are removed in time and space and not casually observable. And so, as you mentioned, Ramya, sometimes it's difficult for people to see what the results are of their own behavior. So making the feedback visible so that people can see the results of their actions is so powerful. And all of you, I think, are exemplary at demonstrating the power of data visualization, making the feedback visible, showing people the relationships between the parts. The other few things, I made some notes on what I saw evidence of that to me is evidence of educating for sustainability. You're all solving more than one problem at a time and minimizing the creation of new problems, which is the definition of a sustainable solution. Win, 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 wins. We're all responsible for the difference we make, taking responsibility, reading the feedback, iterating. All of you were great examples of that. Solutions are local, which is another principle of education for sustainability. Yes, we can share, and one of the powerful things about Drawdown Georgia is that your solutions will be appropriate to Georgia, and others can still learn from what you're doing by the questions you're asking. Maybe the answers are going to be different in other places, but we can scale this work up quite dramatically by sharing information and questions and challenges and how we've overcome them. And I think the last thing that I see evidenced is not the last thing, but the next thing that comes to mind is the assumption that a healthy and sustainable future is possible. It is game on, and we will reverse global warming. There will be a delay in the system. There will, it'll take a little while for things to stabilize again in a new regime of dynamic stability, and we are going to do it. As I mentioned before, we have all the children and young people working with us. That's a powerful source. All right, let's see. We've got a couple of other things going on. Somebody asked Ramya, is Green Cells work directly with students through the free summer camps as opposed to teachers? And do you serve the Forsyth County or a broader area?
Yes, we do serve the Forsyth County. So it is, yes, it's directly with children. So look at it more like an after school program. So, but we do love to work with teachers provide them with resources, mentors, help them, because I think they are doing so much. So there's just so much burden on them that if we can help as a community partner to, lessen that burden, remove some of those roadblocks and barriers, we want to do that. Like I mentioned about that recycling club for my daughter's school. So I think those are the kind of things that we want to be engaged in, those conversations we want to support and help out in any way we can.
Wonderful. Excellent. All right. So if anyone has any final comments, we're about to transition to the resource setup and our thank yous here. So one more round. Anybody like to say anything? I've got one last note here from Jay Bassett that the number 2 most impactful act is about our built environment. So buildings obviously are a huge contributor to both regeneration. It can go either way, to regeneration or to trouble. And so focusing on the school buildings and operations and municipal buildings and operations, as well as homes, is another huge area. So with that, I'm going to transition to, if we could see that last slide of resources for everybody. We have put together a list of links for you. We have vetted all of these. There's a lot out there. I don't think there's a lot of great stuff out there. And there's a lot of education about unsustainability and not education for sustainability. And so you want to make sure that the resources that you are using do what these folks are talking about, which is to make sure that as we introduce the challenges that we're up against, we're also introducing the solutions. The brain scientists say sometimes we have to exercise our free won't, so we understand why we have to exercise our free will to do something differently. And so we do need to understand what's going on, but only so that we can actually do something about it and get to the future we want. So this is a wonderful set of resources. Everybody has put their contact information in the chat. And I would like to thank everybody for being here with us and for understanding the important role the K-12 education plays in contributing to the shift toward a sustainable future. So thanks on behalf of the panel and Drawdown Georgia. I'd like to thank everybody one last time. And remember, this is being recorded, so you'll be able to see it again if you so choose. And please share it with everyone you know.